What concerns you about data today? What is the number one thing that we're not doing right and we should?
If you look at the landscape of data, even data architectures, data tooling in all the various fields, we're all over the show. There's too many architectures, there's too many tooling, and there's open source, and there's just too much. And I think a lot of the newcomers, that's why they come up with these new ideas that's ages old. It's because it's just all over the show. There's no common language in our field. There's lots of different opinions that's a lot of times overlapping and conflicting even. But I think we should get to a common architectures, if you will, and common tooling.
Yeah, in a way, a global taxonomy exercise.
Yeah. The other thing, a simple example is the data mesh versus the data fabric. There's a huge difference, but some people still say it's the same thing. Even the data fabric, from its original meaning up to now, it also changed over time because of vendors' perception, and they wanted to infuse their technology discussion into it. Another example that I can give of that is we started with these concepts of DevOps, and then we said, okay, then there's data ops, which makes sense. And then there's ML ops, which still makes sense. But now there's AI ops. And guess what? AI ops does not mean the same thing as the other three. It is AI for ops. So it should be called Ops AI, not AI ops.
Oh, they got the order wrong. So it's making operations easier by harnessing algorithms.
Yeah, it goes into the infrastructure and the operations, and puts AI on top of it to improve the infrastructure.
So make things faster, more efficient, and sort of optimize the system. So it's an optimization problem.
Yeah, exactly. It is called AI ops, therefore it should mean the ops side of AI, ops for AI, but it means the other way around. So
there's maybe an idea that I'm throwing out there, because I did think about something similar in the past, but I did not follow up because I felt a bit of imposter syndrome, and that stopped me from actually getting on LinkedIn or like, hey, who wants to contribute? But it was this idea. I think the idea initially came from the Master Data Marathon 2 with Scott Taylor. I attended the conference. I loved it, and people were struggling to tell stories of how bad data impacted real businesses and people. And so I thought, why don't we create a master data story table? We contribute the stories as much as we can share. Obviously, there are, it gets tricky, it might get political, so we kind of have to be careful. But if we do it right, instead of having one person crack the problem of data meaning, of unifying, creating a vocabulary for all these terms and what they mean, we could have the community contribute to that and have a system of triaging and merging these things. I mean, still in the back of my mind. Maybe we should execute it. What do you think?
I think so. I agree. Absolutely. One of the things that made me come up also with this frustration is when I joined IBM, and there was this concept of a data reservoir, but the rest of the world was talking about a data lake. But the data reservoir meant something different from a data lake, but the vast majority of people inside and outside IBM had completely different understandings and interpretations of these two things. So, yeah, no, definitely, please. Let's
We
do
should start it.
this.
Yeah. It's going to be really tricky at first. Imagine how many debates on LinkedIn and Twitter threads that people say, what are you talking about, Loris? What are you talking about, Debbie? But yeah, it's fun, right? Like, I don't care. I'm okay with being, with looking ridiculously stupid. It's perfectly fine, as long as we reach a state that is slightly less confusing than it is today. Then
Exactly.
I've done my
And
job.
you mentioned the imposter syndrome. I think a lot of us, much, much more than one would think, it suffer from that. Definitely. Because if we didn't, then we would have all shouted out, but hang on, I thought this is what it means. Now you come with this idea. Oh, you must know better than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also,
Yeah.
you asked what would I like to see less of? And that comes back to this thing of newcomers or youngsters coming up with all these new concepts that's ages old. I would suggest that they first at least Google if their concept isn't
Yeah.
there before they go mainstream and viral with new concepts that the old dogs will tell you. They've gone through it, there's books written about it.
I'm gonna say one good thing about science and research education. There's so many good things and bad things about academia. We all know, those that have tried both worlds know what I'm talking about. But there's one thing that I really like is the mindset of putting things in context. When you start a new research, when you experiment, the very first thing you do before you even start buying the equipment is do a whole lot of literature research, see what people have done, and soon you realize you
Yes.
start from here. You're thinking that your idea
Yeah.
is the smartest, the newest, the most amazing. Then you start Googling, and after 2 weeks, that's the trough of disillusionment when you realize that actually that's been, the entire world has been doing experiments on that exact same thing. You thought it was a niche and a brilliant idea, but it isn't. And so now you have to find a new spin or a new angle, but that's part of the process. And it looks like in data,
But
we don't want to do that. We just want to say, hey, this is new, shiny. Look at me.
exactly, and you will have that something special that you will be able to add to the existing
For sure,
understanding.
exactly. You don't have to go home. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to throw it away. Just add your sweet spot to it.
Yeah, but don't screw up the history and the context, please. Because then it's especially, when you read the paper, you're like, what did these guys do? Oh, okay. Oh, wow, that's a brilliant idea. And then the first page I want to read is give me an overview of what everything that's been done in that field to date. And how does that
Yeah.
thing that you're trying to do compare with the macrocosm of ideas that people already tried? Is it entirely new? Is it slightly new? But it doesn't have to be new to be interesting, right? It could be a spin on something that already exists. Anyways, Debbie, I feel like I took way too much of your time, and I want to, perhaps before we leave, I wanted to ask you, what's the best place to follow you? What is the best place to follow Women in AI? And any last thing you would like to share before we move to a cup of tea?
Me, I'm on LinkedIn, Debbie Botha, straightforward. You can email me at debbie@womeninai.co. Women in AI's website is womeninai.co. And Women in AI is also on LinkedIn, very active. And I would like to, just request the listeners to go and look at the website. Ladies can register as members. There's a place to request for partnerships. We have commercial partnerships and non-commercial partnerships for communities and media and so on. So please have a look. We'll gladly collaborate with you.
Fantastic. Yes, call to action time. Absolutely, do that. And if you haven't subscribed to the list of Discovering Data, that's also a good time to do that. We'll probably be cross-referencing each other through the show notes. Sometimes it's at the bottom, sometimes it's on the left, sometimes you have to click, but you know where your show notes are. Click on that, you'll find a link to Discovering Data and a link to Women in AI, and I'll definitely include Debbie's LinkedIn profile URL there as well, so we can keep the conversation going. Debbie, thank you so much for being with me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.